Veronica is a film by the director of Wreck. And I saw that this was added to Netflix a couple days ago, just kind of out of nowhere. It was just like dropped, and I was like, oh, I guess he has a new film. I knew nothing about it. And I usually try not to judge anything off of its cover art, especially like a synopsis, but all it is a girl screaming. And for some reason in my head, I immediately thought it was going to be a possession, exorcism type of film. And it is not. And even as the film is playing out in the first act, I was like, yep, here we go, here we go. And as the film went on, I was like, oh, like, okay, that's not what this is. Now, for anyone who doesn't know what this is, and if you want to avoid all spoilers and you just want a yay or a nay, it's a good movie, for sure. I enjoyed it. It does feel a tad generic, but I feel like there's enough style here, and there's some good creepy imagery, and there's some chilling moments. And I think that, the fact that this is supposed to be based on true events, they really play off of that pretty well at the end. A lot of these true story movies, they end with those, the text across the screen and then pictures and whatnot, and it just adds to the authenticity of the true story. I mean, whether it's true or not doesn't really matter. I mean, honestly, it's just whether or not our brains want to believe it for the moment so that we can scare ourselves. But those are actually quite effective. So I think that another thing that this film really relies on heavily is obviously the titular character, Veronica. I like to roll my R's anytime I get the chance. But I think the girl who plays Veronica in this movie is wonderful. I think she's very talented, and she carries this film very well. So it was really, hinging on her performance, and I think she really did a great job. So kudos to her. This film is subtitled for anyone who doesn't like to read those. I didn't look to see if there was an option for dubbing on Netflix, but I don't think there is. I don't really watch dubbing much. I don't mind subtitles, although it does take away from the movie just a little bit because you're constantly looking down and up and down and up. And during scenes when you're supposed to be looking at the screen, like maybe if there's a monster over here or something, if it's one of those quick flash ones, you might be reading something while somebody's calling someone out or something. And that can get a little distracting during horror movies. So it's not ideal, but just so you know, it is a subtitled film. And anyway, so let's get into a synopsis. So a girl named Veronica is... the opening reminds me a little bit of Shameless, where there's this young girl, she's about 15, and she is in charge of taking care of her two sisters and her very, very young little brother. And the mother is just this, workaholic. She has no time for the kids because she's constantly out till 2 a.m. At the bar, like working, not drinking, to try to pay the bills. And the 15-year-old is hit with all the responsibilities of taking care of her siblings, so she's had to grow up very fast. And during an eclipse, her and her friends decide to go down into the basement of her Catholic school and play with a Ouija board, which never goes very well. And she tries to summon the spirit of her dead father so she can communicate with him, and everything then starts to go wrong from there. As I said, that's where the generic part of it comes in. There's nothing new much here that you're going to get out of the story or, the plot line or anything like that. The only places where you're going to see any kind of new flavor is in stylistic choices made by the director. And we have a very efficient director here who made a few great horror movies in his career. Wreck being a very highly rated film for good reason. It's a good film, and he has good style here. There's some choices that are quite effective, and I was impressed by some of the visuals and some of the scenes in this movie. There are scenes where you're just kind of like, okay, I know what's going to happen here, and yes, they do. So as I said, there are moments where it starts to feel a tad redundant, talking about like other films in the past. But I found myself enjoying this enough, and especially that last act I thought was done very well. Now, this is a teeny bit spoilery just saying this, so if you want to avoid any kind of spoilers at all, I'd shut it off now. But yeah, it's on Netflix. Go recommend it. I recommend it. But getting into a little teeny spoiler here, the twist is pretty obvious, and this isn't one of those twists that it's so obvious it ruins the movie for me, like something like Goodnight Mommy. Like, I don't know why I let the twist that I figured out like 5 fucking seconds into that movie completely ruin the film for me, but it just did. And I could go into a long explanation of why, but I'm not going to do that here. This was one that was just kind of like, I figured, and it's like, it's still a cool movie though. So anyway, I recommend this to anybody who is into haunted house, ghost flicks, and, another thing that this film does very well is it shows the amount of stress and burdens being put onto youth way before their time. Having too much responsibility when you're supposed to be a kid, and the weight of that just bearing down on you, and the amount of stress and the tricks it can play on your mind and whatnot. So when you're too tired and you're trying to do everything at once, when you're underdeveloped to even take on such a task. So I thought that the girl who plays Veronica in this did a stellar job conveying to the audience how tired she was and how much she wishes she was a kid. There's scenes in the movie that just remind us of like, this is a child. Like, she looks like a child, but because she's taking on so many responsibilities, like adult responsibilities, you kind of start to forget. And then there's moments where she reminds us, like, this is a child. And you can also look at this film in a couple different ways, which is always a good thing with a film. And you can go back and watch it one of two ways. So anyway, guys, let me know if you saw this and what you thought, and if you go and check it out, let me know as always, and I look forward to hearing what you guys think and talking to you in the comments. All right.